sign and wave a hand. I'm no longer the man I used to be. Thank God Almighty, I'm free at last. I'm free, but what about the other ones? The wayward daughters and the prodigal sons, yeah. Who am I to decide what's wrong or right? I'm just a sinner who can say I've seen the light. Why pretend to defend and condemn them? Throwing stones is a reversible trend, yeah, yeah. We've gotta come together now. We gotta work this out somehow. I need you and you need me, and together we can be better friends and better than we used to be. Some have sown seeds of hate, but it's never too late to erase our mistakes, yeah, yeah. Wave a hand, wave a hand. We gotta come together now. We gotta work this out somehow. Everybody needs somebody. We gotta come together now. We gotta work this out somehow. Yeah, yeah. 'Cause I need you and you need me, and together we can be better friends and better than we used to be. Some have sown seeds of hate, but it's never too late to erase your mistakes, yeah, yeah. Wave a hand, wave a hand. We gotta come together now. We gotta work this out somehow. Wave a hand, wave a hand. We gotta come together.
Good morning and welcome to Synetos Radio. I am your host, Danae McDaniel, and this is a place where we have real conversations about real financial matters. This show is sponsored by Lighthouse Financial, located in Brea, California, and they are a registered investment advisor with the Securities Exchange Commission. This radio show is for educational purposes only and should never be construed as advice. Always consult your professional when seeking specific personal advice for yourself. Now, today we're going to continue in our March theme that it is not luck, even though St. Patrick would say that it is. It is not the luck of the Irish that actual financial success comes from planning. And so I have a very special guest with me today, George McDaniel. Welcome to the show. Yay!
Oh, I hear that. Thank you. Thank you.
Now, you are the CEO and founder of Lighthouse Financial. You are also a certified financial planner for over 25 years. And, I don't think a lot of people realize this about you, but you were actually one of the first or pioneering financial advisors that came in and said, you know what, we need to do better for our clients. We need to create a business model that would allow or put protection in to make sure that those clients were really being taken care of as a fiduciary responsibility. And so you helped kind of escalate that fee-only business structure, didn't you?
Yes, we did. Yes.
That's fantastic. Now, we talk a lot about that on the show. We talk about different business structures, that there's commission or fee-based and fee-only. And so, George, I just want to thank you for bringing that into Lighthouse so that all of our clients there can be enjoying that peace of mind that you get with fee-only firms because you definitely, there's no commissions, there's no back-end benefits that are received, but actually every advisor at Lighthouse is putting their clients' needs first.
That is correct. Thank you.
Yes, so fantastic to have you here today. So we are here to specifically talk about one area of financial planning, and it is actually a little tiny sliver of an option that people have today. And so we're going to talk specifically about Roth conversions or IRA Roth conversions. So George, would you mind sharing just a little bit about what that is first?
Thank you, Danae. Sure, I will. We're going to take a little bit of time just kind of defining what an IRA is and specifically what a Roth conversion is. But before I can get into that, I need to go back a step or two because there has been a individual savings plan available for individuals to save for their retirement. That's called a traditional IRA.
That's right.
And that traditional IRA was kind of the forerunner to the Roth. The traditional IRA was established in 1974. Some 23 years later, the Roth was established.
Oh, interesting.
So when we look at each one of them, they really are different in the standpoint how they're being taxed. So if you just think about the difference between a Roth IRA and a traditional IRA, you got to think taxes. So when the traditional IRA was established in 1974, it was designed to take money that you have not been taxed on, put it in an investment, and allow that investment to earn over a longer period of time in preparation for your retirement. Then at retirement, you took that money out.
Yes, you do, and you enjoy it.
And that's the exciting part of it, is it allows individuals to prepare themselves for their own retirement. But at the time you take that money out, you are taking it out with a tax liability associated with each draw of dollars from the investment accounts. So the traditional IRA, you put money into it, tax deferred. You have not paid taxes on it. You grow it tax deferred until you make distributions, at which time then you are taxed.
Right.
All right, now let's talk about Roth, because Roth is an exciting new concept. You just think in reverse. The reverse of all I just said
is
what
opposite.
a Roth is. And that really is saying, okay, I'm going to take after-tax dollars I've already paid taxes on, and invest in a Roth IRA. And the growth, the earnings on that Roth IRA are going to be deferred until some future point in time, retirement, that which then I will draw from that Roth IRA. Now, the big difference here is it is tax-free. Yes, that's the exciting part. For most people, it's the most exciting part because people don't like to pay taxes, and I don't blame them, and I don't either. But in this case, you do get this particular type of savings account that the government has put in place, tax-free.
Okay, so that's the difference between an IRA and a Roth. So what is a Roth conversion?
All right, good question, because a Roth conversion is what many refer to as a backdoor Roth. And that's just saying, okay, a Roth, individual Roth, a contributory Roth, you are limited by your income. So if you're single, you're making over $135,000, you can't contribute to Roth. If you're married, filing jointly, 198 is a limit.
Right.
So that does restrict a number of people from participating in this great investment vehicle. So the backdoor Roth says, oh, hey, I've got some IRAs, traditional IRAs. Maybe I can convert those into a Roth. And the IRS says, yes, you can. So the conversion of a traditional IRA is what we call a converted IRA, a Roth IRA that has been converted from the traditional IRA.
Okay, so if we're wanting to do this, it seems like the benefit would really go to the people that are doing this, that they can then grow their assets tax-free. They can withdraw it down in retirement tax-free. So why would the IRS allow this as an option for us?
That's an interesting question, because the way you state that, it's kind of like, this is a benevolent thing really designed to help everyone prepare themselves for retirement. And in fact, really, it goes back to 1997 when Senator William Roth proposed this concept. And let me take you back just a little bit to that time frame. In the 90s, we had a tremendous growth spurt, similar to what we have today, meaning we have about 10 years of growth in the market, very positive, which was kind of leveraged off the big dot-com period when everything that had .com on it was exploding in value, going up tremendously without any earnings. It was a weird kind of time in the market, in my opinion. But it was an interesting, exciting time in the market. But when that period came to an end, the most dynamic economy in the world was beginning to slip into a recession.
Right.
So the recession occurred early in 2000. It lasted about 2.5 years. But that time, when William Roth, the senator from Delaware, decided he's going to propose this, he could see what was happening in the economy, and he felt that since many, $6.5 trillion of money was in IRAs across the country, that was not benefiting the government at all because it's all being tax deferred.
Right.
Yes.
That's right.
So in this case, he thought, well, what if I could advance some of those dollars back into real time in the current time? That certainly would help the government support and keep funding their various projects. So there came the birth of the Roth. It really was designed around advancing taxes into the current year, probably more so than it was involved in giving people an opportunity to defer taxes out into the future point in time. So that's kind of the history of the Roth and why it was recreated. It ended up being a win-win for both the individual and the government, because it gave all of us an option to how we would like and what is best for us to prepare ourselves for the future retirement.
Okay, so I agree that this did end up being a win-win. Definitely the IRS doesn't do much that they don't gain something from, but also for people interested in doing Roths or creating their Roths, it really can be a great benefit. However, I do understand that restrictions apply, and that really it's something important that you talk with a financial planner before you do a Roth conversion, and really research if this is the right thing for you. And that really, even with this, at first it sounds like this is a great deal. Put everything into an IRA, then move it over into a Roth, and then you get everything tax-free. But because there's some nuances to it, there's some rules and restrictions to it, what are some considerations that you think people really need to keep top of mind when they're considering a Roth conversion?
When you think of a Roth conversion, first of all, you're taking those dollars that are in an IRA, traditional IRA, and you're moving them into an after-tax account. Which means that when you do that, the IRS is going to want their money up front because you've never paid a single penny on those dollars in the traditional IRA. So when you make that decision to convert to a Roth IRA, you're going to pay the government all the taxes due on that money that you convert. You're going to advance the money. So that's the first and foremost should be on people's minds.
So let me ask a question about that.
Okay.
So when you're saying you have to pay the taxes, let's say I have $100,000 in a IRA right now, a traditional IRA, and I want to convert that over. And so I convert the entire $100,000. I'm in the 15 or let's say 20% tax bracket. So you're looking at what, $20,000?
$20,000 of federal. Then you have a 5 or 6% on the state.
Okay, so you do have to pay both state and federal when you bring it over. So then in my tax return for 2018, I not only have my own wages and my own investment income, but now I have this additional 20 to 25% of tax liability. So I really need to think about this. And if I have a lower tax year then, like maybe I only work 3 months out of the year and have a real low income, this might actually be beneficial to do in that year, where other years I could find myself in a higher tax bracket, correct?
Yes, you could.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, when you think of the two different scenarios, the Roth IRA, people need to think that they're in a lower income tax bracket today, and the future will be a higher tax bracket.
That's right.
That makes sense then, because you then are eliminating paying taxes on money you would make in a higher bracket in the future. Where a traditional IRA is reversed, right?
Right.
It is saying I'm in a higher bracket now, and when I'm in retirement years, I will be in a lower tax bracket.
Okay. Very good. Something else maybe that we need to consider.
On the conversion portion?
On the conversion portion, yes. Maybe I think there's a 5-year rule or something.
Yes, there actually are 2 parts of a Roth conversion that you have to be concerned with. One is upon conversion, you must have those funds remain in place for 5 years before you withdraw any distributions from them. The other one is, like the traditional IRA, you must be 59 and a half. So those are the 2 basic rules.
To distribute from or to contribute to?
To distribute from without paying taxes or a penalty on the taxes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you can do the conversion before 59 and a half,
Yes.
But you can't take the assets until you reach that 59.5 unless you pay a penalty.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
That's interesting, because let me go back just a second, because I mentioned that there was a adjusted gross income limits that would make you ineligible to contribute to a Roth IRA.
Right.
The conversion there is no income limit, so you can convert at any income, adjusted gross income level you find yourself. So there's not a penalty to do that. So that's why they call it kind of the backdoor Roth IRA, because you can circumvent that income level limit by making the conversions from a traditional IRA into the Roth.
Oh, I see. Okay. So those are some of the things that our listeners need to consider. So how do they know if a Roth conversion is actually right for them?
First, I think when you look at your income is really the criteria. If you see that you have a year that you're going to have a lower income, and thus your tax liability is going to be lower, that's a perfect time to think in terms of converting to a Roth. Let me give you an example. In Lighthouse Financial Services, we actually provide individuals with what I consider to be three pieces of a three-legged stool. Let me say that
yes.
again, right?
Let's try that this morning here.
And those three legs are investments, taxes, and planning. So in the tax portion during a year, as we meet with our clients to cover various aspects that are planning, we're able to see what's happening in their life during that period of time. So it enables us to help them make the wiser decisions as to maybe when should you convert traditional IRA into a Roth. Let me give you a couple examples. One example would be, we had a client last year that we were talking with, and it was on the investment side, doing a portfolio review, and discussion went into taxes, and they mentioned that they were buying an electric car as a replacement for their old car. And then as we continued discussing that option and how excited they were about that new car, they also mentioned that, by the way, we're getting solar panels on our house. And then what all went off, a bunch of bells and whistles started going off in my brain saying, whoa, let's stop, let's take a look. Because you're going to get a credit about $7,500 on an electric car. You're going to credit somewhere around $8,000 for the solar panel. Maybe what we can do is make a decision to convert some of that IRA money we are managing now into a Roth. And so we did. We did the process during a year, and last year was an unusual year for them because of those reasons, they did have a lower taxable liability. Now this year, I'll give you another example, real quick one.
Okay, fantastic.
I'm working with a client who's going through a divorce, and that individual is looking at this year to be a very low income year because of all the transitions that take place during that period of time in their lives. So what I'm looking at, I'm saying, hey, we've got an opportunity here because there's about 3 or 4 different small IRAs that are out there that have done horrible, by the way.
That wasn't happy news for the client.
No, my client's not listening right now. But it really was, and they understand it, but did not do well. And so we are in a process of consolidating those and converting them into a Roth because it appears that there will be no tax liability on converting about $22,000 of traditional IRA into Roth because she just fits into that perfect position from a tax standpoint.
Okay, so help me understand that, because we always talk about Roths and these conversions, that there's this tax consequence. You have to pay the taxes on it. But there are certain spaces in which you make that conversion and it adds absolutely zero additional
taxes.
Wow.
Yes, there are perfect situations. Now, it doesn't always happen, but generally what happens is you really mitigate your tax liability because you have that lower tax tiered portion called a 10 to 15% tax brackets.
Right.
Those, if you can keep a conversion within those two brackets, it's a perfect decision to consider saying maybe it's time to do that.
Okay, those are some great ways to understand. So if you fall in lower tax brackets or you find that you're going to have some additional tax credits for your tax return this year, then maybe a Roth conversion.
Maybe a Roth. It's definitely worth considering. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so let me ask you something. We've been talking about IRAs. We've been talking about Roth IRAs, conversions. Now, last week on our show, we talked about how in a Roth IRA or a traditional IRA that you can take all the way up through April 15th, or I think it's April 17th this year, to make a contribution and have that contribution count for the year before. And so then you make your contribution, you then take your deduction on the front of the tax return, and it lowers the 2017 tax liability. Can you do that in a Roth conversion? Can I decide today to do a Roth conversion that will count for last year?
Yes, you can make that decision up until April 17th. On the traditional IRA, you will lower your tax liability for 2017. A Roth contribution account, you will not lower your tax liability, but you can install a Roth IRA for 2017.
Right.
Now, the real advantage of that is, I mentioned before, there's a 5-year rule from the time that you convert or that you add money to your first Roth IRA account. So you have 5 years and 59.5 in order to avoid the taxes or the tax and penalties.
Right.
So if you did that this year, you would start the clock based on January 1st of 17. So you've already had 15 months into your 5-year requirement. So it's great to do it for that purposes. Now this is a contribution IRA only. I'm only talking about an IRA that you're contributing to, not a conversion.
Okay, so let's talk about the conversion specifically. Can you do a conversion this month and count it as if you did it in 2017?
No, you cannot. That's the big difference. That's why I was explaining the other first. So,
nuances, people, nuances.
It is, because if you do the contributory IRA, Roth IRA, you can back up. But if you do the conversion, it occurs in the year of conversion. And there's also another little nuance to that, Danae, is if you do it in December of this year, you could actually consider it whenever the money were transferred. So you split years. The nuances is when should you do that? So that's another area that would be of interest. But anyway,
so you could do like half in December, at the end of December, and half again in January.
You could, yes.
And it would be considered 2 conversions and no penalties for each year.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, but if I do it now, then it's for 2018.
It is for
18. You have to do it in the calendar year.
And it's 2018, regardless if you do it January or December. It's a calendar year. That is correct.
Okay, very good. So with this, it seems like there are some risks to it, and that you kind of have to know your tax situation. You have to be able to anticipate what your income's going to be when you decide to make this conversion. So let's say I go ahead and make a conversion, and I know I'm going to have a low tax year, but then suddenly I get promoted or I get this incredible bonus, and now I'm in new tax brackets and I've already done the conversion. Is there like an undo button with this, or something that you can do differently to fix that problem?
It's interesting, because if you'd asked me this question last year in December, I would have said, yes, there is an undo. It's called recharacterization. And recharacterization was put in place a number of years ago to allow people to do that undo button. And usually the undo button was around if the mark was really volatile and you made the conversion in 1 year when the mark was really high, and then you're paying taxes in the next year when the mark was really low, and you look at it and say, uh-oh, I made a mistake. I should have waited a year. I would have paid less taxes because the value of the portfolio was down.
Was dropped down.
So, but there's always a but when you start this, right? Last year, the Tax Cut and Jobs Act that was signed by President Trump in December.
We've had lots of discussions about this, because there's so many things that people don't realize happened in this.
Yes,
this
and
tax
this is
law.
one of those things to do. There is no longer a recharacterization. So it's basically what it's saying is, once you make a decision to convert, it is final.
It's
permanent.
final.
Yes.
So just in general, obviously we don't give recommendations over the radio here, but in general, would it be better then to wait towards the end of the year when you have a really good sense of what your income and tax liability is before you do the conversion, just to kind of thwart off some of these things? Or does it really just depend on the initial situation of each individual?
It really depends on each individual, and it depends on the time of year and your ability to predict what's going to happen in the market day to day or hour to hour, which doesn't usually help much at all when you're looking at the times in the market when it's really moving. So no, it really isn't. I think it's a planning, and you got to think long term. Because
Absolutely.
you make that conversion early in the year, if the market's really good, it could grow tax-free for 11 months or so. And if you make it later, you would maybe not gain that advantage.
Good point. That's a great point.
But on the other hand, market could go down too. So it could be better to wait. So it's really better to say, I've got a plan. I'm looking long term, and I'm going to put this money aside for my future retirement, and then you do it.
Fantastic. Now, we've been talking about if-then statements around Roth conversions, lots of buts and maybes and perhaps, considering these different nuances. Are there any other nuances that we haven't talked about so far this morning?
There's a couple. Social Security is one of those.
Okay. Good point.
Yeah. See, if you're drawing Social Security benefits. If you take a distribution for traditional IRA, that distribution comes to the front of your 1040, your tax return, and it could impact the amount of your Social Security that would become taxable.
Okay, so if I do a Roth conversion and now I have this additional tax liability, I also need to consider how that additional income or that tax liability is going to impact my Social Security taxes.
That's correct.
Okay.
Not from a Roth standpoint, though, because the Roth comes out tax-free.
Right.
So it will not come onto the front of your 1040. But certainly a traditional IRA does impact, or the potentially impacts, their Social Security taxability.
Okay, so let's just switch gears. I know we've been talking about Roth conversions, and we've been going back and forth between traditional IRAs and Roths. Now, just for a moment, for traditional IRAs, there's a required time, right, that people have to start drawing down assets. So you have to wait to 59 and a half, and then you have to start taking money out at some point, right? Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah, just quickly, the government has said, I'm going to allow us all to participate in an IRA, especially a traditional IRA, when we have not paid any taxes on it until we start drawing down. They're saying, whoops, we're going to have a cutoff for that. So we want to start having you pay taxes on an amount at a certain period of time. They've chosen 70 and 1/2 years of age. So when anyone turns 70 and 1/2, they are required to take a distribution based on algorithm, based on age of each year, and the amount of total investments in your IRAs, and you're going to be paying ordinary taxes on that distribution at that point in time. However, Roth.
Another however.
However, now if you have a Roth IRA or a Roth conversion,
right,
you do not have to meet the requirements of RMD. You can keep those growing as long as you want to, and you have a great opportunity to transfer them into the next generation tax-free.
Okay, so I just want to kind of recap a little bit some of the nuances because we've had several of them. So one is that IRAs and Roths have different tax implications.
Yes.
One is tax deferred, one you put in after tax. But the distribution side of that is that you get to draw a Roth down tax-free, as well as all the gains that have grown over those years are tax-free.
That's correct.
But an IRA, you draw down and you pay taxes on it.
You pay ordinary taxes on it.
Ordinary income tax.
Yes.
So whatever your tax bracket is, that's what you're going to pay.
That's what you pay.
Okay. Then you also have a nuance of a 5-year rule.
Yes.
That people have to take into consideration that when they put that money in, no drawing it out for 5 years or until you're 59 and a half.
Yes.
Is that correct? There's the or?
And there's nuances to that too. So I know we don't have time to go into those, but it's worth at least asking your professional person that you're working with to make sure it's the right decision for you, because those little nuances can trip you up.
Okay, fantastic. And then the last nuance that we were just talking about is that at 70 and a half with a traditional IRA, you have to start drawing money down.
That's correct.
And then in a Roth, you do not have to.
That is correct.
So you can start seeing where a conversion of these assets early on in the planning process and then working that plan out would be very advantageous, but to do it willy-nilly or in a spur of the moment could actually be fairly harmful.
Yes. As a matter of fact, when we do analysis of a conversion for our clients, we're running about 60% yes, it's the right thing to do, and about 40% no, it's not the appropriate thing to do, depending on each individual's income brackets, their assets, their age, how long they might hold that Roth IRA after a conversion. It all enters into the picture, because the longer you hold the Roth IRA, it grows tax-free, and the better it is and the more positive it is to make that decision to convert.
Okay, I see. So we've covered a lot today. I have time for one more question. And really, is there anything else that we need to know that comes to mind when we think about these nuances that our audience needs to be aware of before they go talk to their financial planner?
I think the only thing, when you look at the 5-year rule for a traditional IRA, for a contributory Roth IRA and a converted IRA, they are different. Just make sure you understand that difference and understand how they are. The 5-year table or clock starts real quick. For instance, if you're making a contribution IRA, that clock starts the first account you put in place, the first dollar you put in place, and once that 5-year rule is met, all future IRAs, regardless of how many different accounts, you've already met the 5-year rule.
Okay.
So it only starts at the very beginning, at first IRA. Once that has gone 5 years, every contribution after that, you've already met the 5-year rule. Now, on the conversion, that's not the case. Each conversion carries its own clock.
Oh, good distinction here.
So that's a nuance that you got to think in terms of, is it right for me to do this or not? Okay. And on the distribution side, there's more nuances on the distribution. What qualifies to be a legitimate distribution, tax-free, as opposed to having a penalty or taxable on some of those money. So both of those are nuances you've got to make sure you really understand.
Well, George, I want to thank you for being on our show today. I appreciate your insight and all the valuable knowledge that you've provided our audience today. And this really ends our time together. If you want to hear more from George or have questions for him, you can reach him at 714-572-8900, or you can email him at george@lighthouselink.com. Coming up next, we have Sean Kelly on Hours of Hope, and we will talk again with you next week when we have our guest, JC Lowe, with us. Have a great week, everyone.